Caught my fiancé of 13 years cheating while I was pregnant with our first child. I feel shattered and betrayed beyond words. How am I supposed to trust again when the person I loved most broke my heart? Hey Reddit. My fiancé, Mark, and I have been together for 13 years. We've shared nearly every part of our lives, friends, families, dreams. We've grown from our early 20s to our 30s side by side, and I honestly thought we'd always be together. We've gone through so much over the years, and while we had ups and downs, it felt like we had a strong foundation. Recently, we reached a big milestone. After years of talking about it, we decided to have a baby. It took some time, and honestly it felt like a small miracle when I found out I was pregnant. Mark seemed thrilled. He even teared up when I told him, saying it was the happiest he'd ever felt. I thought this was a new chapter in our lives that would bring us closer. As the pregnancy progressed, things felt different. I chalked it up to us adjusting to the reality of parenthood. Mark was busier with work, often working late or going out for drinks with colleagues to relieve the stress, as he put it. I was a little disappointed, hoping he'd be more hands-on during this time, but I told myself he'd come around. After all, he'd always been a little distant with things like feelings, and I thought maybe he just needed time. Then, one night, I noticed his phone vibrating while he was in the shower. Normally, I wouldn't even think of touching his phone, but something in me just snapped. Maybe it was all the hormones, maybe it was the isolation I'd been feeling, or maybe it was a gut instinct. Either way, I picked it up and saw a string of messages from someone named Brianna. My stomach sank. The texts were flirtatious, intimate even. She was asking when they'd meet up again, saying she couldn't stop thinking about him, and mentioning things I'd rather not imagine. When he came out of the shower, I confronted him, holding his phone with shaking hands. He tried to deny it at first, saying it was nothing, just a misunderstanding. But when I pressed him, he finally admitted to seeing Brianna for the past 6 months. 6 months. Meaning, he started seeing her around the time I found out I was pregnant. I felt my whole world crashing down. His excuse was that he felt overwhelmed by the idea of becoming a dad, and this other woman gave him an escape. He said it wasn't serious, that he didn't love her, and that it was just a distraction. But the betrayal was already done. The man I loved, the father of my unborn child, was cheating on me while I was carrying his baby. In the days that followed, I felt like a ghost in my own life. I could barely sleep or eat, which obviously wasn't ideal for the pregnancy. Mark was apologetic, pleading with me to stay, saying he'd end things with Brianna and focus on us. He even went as far as to suggest couples counseling, trying to convince me he wanted to be there for our baby. My friends and family were divided. Some encouraged me to leave, saying that once trust is broken, it's almost impossible to rebuild. Others suggested I give him another chance, citing our long history together and the fact that we'd soon be parents. I felt torn, unable to make a clear decision. Part of me wanted to believe he could change, that he'd just made a terrible mistake. But another part of me wondered if I'd ever be able to look at him without remembering what he did. One night, a friend of mine who'd gone through a similar experience told me something that really hit home. She said, "Do you want to be with him because you still love him, or because you're scared to do this alone?" And that's when it hit me. I had been holding on, not out of love, but out of fear. Fear of being a single mom, fear of losing the life I'd built with him, and fear of facing the unknown. I told Mark I needed space to figure things out. He moved out temporarily and has been staying with his brother. In the meantime, I've started individual counseling to sort through my feelings. I need to be strong for my baby, and right now, that means putting my own well-being first. Update. It's been about a month since I first found out about Mark's affair, and I wanted to give an update. Since he moved out, I've had time to process everything without his presence clouding my thoughts. The initial shock has faded, and I'm beginning to feel a strange sense of clarity. In therapy, I've unpacked a lot of things I've been ignoring. I realized that our relationship hadn't been as perfect as I thought. There were red flags that I brushed aside, times he'd been distant or prioritizing his friends and work over me. I'd always thought I could handle those things because I loved him, but looking back, I see how much I compromised on my own happiness. Mark has been trying to prove he's changed. He sends me messages every day, asking how I'm doing and if there's anything he can do to support me. He's been going to therapy himself and has even stopped drinking, saying he wants to be the man I deserve. He also keeps bringing up how he wants to be there for our child and that he hopes we can work things out. I can see that he's trying, but I also can't ignore what he's done. I can't just forgive and forget because he's making an effort now. Every time I think about taking him back, I remember the night I found those messages and how my heart shattered. It's hard to imagine being with someone who made me feel so betrayed. At this point, I think I'm leaning towards ending things for good. I don't want to raise my child in an environment filled with resentment and mistrust. I'd rather be alone and focus on being the best mom I can be than stay in a relationship that makes me feel small and insecure. Mark is still holding on to the idea of reconciliation, and I won't deny that part of me wishes it could be that simple. But the more time I spend on my own, the more I realize I deserve someone who values and respects me fully. I may not have all the answers yet, but I know that I need to take control of my life and do what's best for me and my child. Thank you to everyone who took the time to read and comment on my story. Your advice and support have meant the world to me. I'm still scared of what the future holds, but I'm trying to be brave, for me and for my baby.